Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday and the patch notes for patch 14.2 have been posted, which means it's time for us to talk through the top 5 changes of this week's patch. I'll let you guys know what the biggest changes were and what you can be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 14.2 is the first patch we've had following the new season start, and as a result, it is a pretty hefty patch. There are a ton of champions receiving nerfs, a ton of champions receiving buffs, and some other fun little odds and ends that we'll have an opportunity to talk about today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into the list, starting off with the number 5 change on this week's patch, the introduction of Smolder, the fiery fledgling. Now, Smolder is intended as a bot lane AD carry. He's a relatively simple to-play champion, and also he is a dragon. So I expect him to be extremely popular. He's going to have a very high presence in your games. That said, I don't think he's particularly strong. There's not a lot of synergy between Smolder's abilities and the attack damage carry role, and as a result, I don't think he's going to be very good, but expect him to be picked and banned a lot in your games regardless. I'm excited to play him, but definitely not the strongest champion I've ever seen at launch. Moving on to the number 4 changes here, I want to talk about the Fizz nerfs. Now, Fizz has been sort of the buzzword as of the new patch, but mostly I don't think it's because Fizz is broken. I think it's because his itemization was fixed. For years, Fizz has been buying items that give him stats he wants, but also paying for stats on those items that he doesn't care about at all. Finally, he can buy the stats that he wants at a reasonable price point, and as a result, he feels much better to play, but I don't think this makes him overwhelmingly strong. Accordingly, Riot aren't nerfing him very hard. There's a very small nerf to both his Q and his W, as well as a nerf to Storm Surge as well, in case you guys are curious. Storm Surge lost 10 AP and 10% off the AP ratio on its passive. So it is a heftier nerf than you would otherwise expect for Fizz, but it's not a huge change, and I think it's because Riot are trying to tell us, hey, Fizz isn't broken, but we're nerfing him, so people stop, like, jamming him in every game, and so, because he's actually, like, statistically balanced and we don't think he's actually a problem. That's what I expect these changes are aimed at. Now, I could be wrong. People could just continue jamming Fizz in every single game. I do expect him to continue to be a very popular pick because of Storm Surge, but I also think that these changes will do a little bit at curbing some of the enthusiasm people have for Fizz and maybe reining him back in a little bit. We'll have to see how things develop over time. Moving on to the number 3 change here on this week's patch, we're talking about everyone's favorite champion on this channel, Briar. Now, for those of you keeping track at home, this is 6 of the 8 patches in which she's been live. That is a 75% nerf rate on patches since she has come out, which is crazy to think about. But either way, Briar is receiving changes on this week's patch. Stop me if you've heard this before. Briar players keep building her lethality, so Riot are nerfing lethality and buffing her bruiser build. Crazy. These changes, again, are very targeted at the lethality build. Head Rush now deals only magic damage, but it does apply on hit effects and lifesteal, which is quite nice. Blood Frenzy now doesn't have as much of a heal based on the damage dealt. It's now only 45% from 60, which is kind of a big deal. And the passive has been tweaked very slightly. The healing amplification has been nerfed, but it also now has a bonus health scaling, meaning that if you're building bonus health, i.e. you're building Bruiser, you're going to get some more of that health back in terms of healing. As a result, I like the direction of these changes. I think these are a meaningful power down to lethality Briar and a meaningful buff to Bruiser Briar, but we've been here before. There seems to be no silver bullet for Riot, and as a result, I don't know that these changes are going to fix the problem with how people are building Briar. Anyways, I'll see you guys all in 14.3 for the next round of Briar nerfs, but I don't think these are going to be enough. She's been nerfed too many times, you guys. Moving on to the number 2 changes here, I want to talk about the Twisted Fate changes. Now, these sort of came out of nowhere to me. TF was a very strong champion on 14.1. in part due to how much burst damage is sort of front-loaded into the game now, but Riot are actually giving him a slew of effectively buffs. So Riot are finally allowing AD Twisted Fate to be supported. Now, this is a cheesy off-build that's existed basically the entire game the game's been out, but the problem with it is it's never been supported, right? It's sort of like AD Malzahar from back in the day. Like, yeah, it's kind of janky and cheesy, and it only works because there's some, like, weird ratios or weird mechanics on the Champions kit, but, like, it's not supported. Riot don't want it to be a thing. But this is Riot finally saying AD Twisted Fate is real. It is a thing. You are going to see it in your games, and it is going to be good. They're making this change because they want Twisted Fate to be a little bit more flexible, and they want to give him an off-build in certain scenarios. For example, if you're planning on playing Twisted Fate mid, but the enemy team is super tanky, and APTF would be bad. Or if you're planning on playing TF mid, but your whole team is magic damage oriented, and you want to be able to flex in some physical damage for your team. That's what these changes are intended to support. They will make bot lane TF real as well, as if he's building AD. But in general, this is still going to be a power-up across the board for TF no matter what. First off, his passive will give him even more bonus gold if he critically strikes on the attack. This bonus gold is weighted towards 1s rather than 6s, but suffice it to say, it's still free gold every time you crit. Wildcards and Stack Deck now have AD ratios, meaning that they don't tickle anymore just because you're building AD. They're actually going to do a reasonable amount of damage. And Pick a Card has some spicy changes here. It now has a critical strike multiplier, which means that if you have crit strike and you crit on a Pick a Card, you get even more damage off of that, as well as locking in the card resets his auto attack timer, and Pick a Card now affects inhibitors and the Nexus. These are going to make AD Twisted Fate completely real. I also think that these are going to make Twisted Fate a very strong champion in 14.2. He's already very playable now that he has multiple builds to choose from, and for example, he's already splashing Rapid Fire Cannon in the AP build. Now that build is even more real for him because he can benefit from the crits. And as a result, I think Twisted Fate is going to be very strong on 14.2. Expect to see him a lot more in your games. Finally, the number one change on patch 14.2 are the changes to the stat shards, which is a change nobody wanted and I don't think anyone saw coming, but is here now, so there's that. The biggest thing here is the stat shards were a solved system. You knew what decisions were correct to make based on lane matchup. If I'm top lane into a Gwen, I'm going to take magic resistant stat shards. Right, like that's not a thought process, I just do it. But conversely, there are also some extremely feels bad moments to the system. For example, I thought it was a top lane Gwen, but it's actually a top lane Garen. Now I have magic resistant stat shards into an AD champion, and I'm going to have a bad time. The changes here are aimed at making it so that there are real and meaningful trade-offs based on what stat shard you're choosing, as well as addressing the issue with resistances only being good against one kind of damage. To wit, in row 3, we now have 65 base health instead of resist. And instead of resist as well, the armor and magic resistance options in both row 2 and row 3 have been replaced. Now instead you can get bonus health based on level, or 2% movement speed in row 2, or 10% tenacity and slow resist in row 3. These are meaningful options and meaningful trade-offs, and as a result I expect the system to be a lot less solved. If you're not used to playing with your stat shards, definitely start taking a look at them because there's a lot more to think about nowadays, and as a result definitely keep this in mind in your own games. Anyways, that is going to be it for me today, guys. Those are the top 5 changes to patch 14.2. Let me know what you're most excited for down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.